Welcome to episode 4 of Twisted Tales, a channel that focuses on the paranormal, supernatural, and downright sketchy stuff in the world around us. Today we bring you Broadmoor Hospital. So sit back, enjoy and subscribe, but above all, don't fall asleep. Broadmoor Hospital is a high-security psychiatric hospital in Crowthorne, Berkshire, England. It is the oldest of England's 3 high-security psychiatric hospitals, the other 2 being Ashworth Hospital near Liverpool and Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire. The hospital's catchment area consists of 4 National Health Service regions: London, Eastern, South East and South West, and is managed by the West London NHS Trust. But first we need to go back to its roots as the Broadmoor we all know of today. The hospital was first known as the Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum. Completed in 1863, it was built to a design by Sir Joshua Jebb, an officer of the Corps of Royal Engineers, and covered 53 acres within its secure perimeter. The first patient was a female admitted for infanticide, this being the intentional killing of infants or offspring, and arrived on the 27th of May 1863. Notes from this time described her as being feeble-minded, and has been suggested by an analysis of her records that she most likely had congenital syphilis. The first male patients arrived on the 27th of February 1864. The original building plan of 5 blocks, 4 for men and 1 for women, was completed in 1868. An additional male block was built in 1902. Due to overcrowding at Broadmoor, an extending asylum branch was constructed at Rampton Secure Hospital and opened in 1912. Rampton was closed as a branch asylum at the end of 1919 and reopened as an institution for mental defectives rather than lunatics. During the First World War, Broadmoor's Block 1 was also used as a prisoner of war camp, called Crowthorne War Hospital, for mentally ill German soldiers. The first medical superintendent was John Meyer. His assistant, William Orange, succeeded him. Orange established a management style that was greatly admired. He also advised the Home Office on how to approach criminal insanity. Orange was in charge from 1870 to 1886. All going well so far. From its opening until 1948, Broadmoor was managed by a Council of Supervision, appointed by and reporting to the Home Secretary. Thereafter, the Criminal Justice Act 1948 transferred ownership of the hospital to the Department of Health in relation to the newly formed NHS, and oversight to the Board of Control for Lunacy and Mental Deficiency, established under the Mental Deficiency Act 1913. Because of its high walls and other visible security features, the hospital is often assumed to be a prison by members of the public. Many of its patients are sent to it via the criminal justice system, and its original design brief incorporated an essence of addressing criminality, in addition to mental illness. However, the layout inside and the daily routine are intended to assist the therapy practiced there, rather than to be run as a prison. Nearly all staff are members of the Prison Officers Association, as opposed to other health service unions such as Unison and the Royal College of Nursing. Broadmoor uses both psychiatric medication and psychotherapy, as well as occupational therapy. One of the therapies available is the arts, and patients are encouraged to participate in the Consular Award Scheme. One of the longest detained patients at Broadmoor is Albert Haynes, who set a legal precedent in 2011 when his mental health tribunal hearing was allowed to be fully public. He argued there that he had never been given the type of counseling he had always sought, and the panel urged the clinicians to work more collaboratively and clearly towards his psychiatric rehabilitation. Considered a prison disguised as a hospital by many, Broadmoor's history of housing the most dangerous, along with England's psychologically distressed, will surely unsettle anyone. Notable patients include Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, who was sent there in 1984. Sutcliffe was attacked 3 times by other patients while at the hospital, one of which caused him to lose vision in his left eye. The Yorkshire Ripper died at University Hospital of North Durham, aged 74, having been sent there due to a COVID diagnosis and other health issues. Ronnie Cray, one of the infamous Cray twins, carried out crimes across the East End of London in the 50s and 60s. The pair were convicted in 1969 and sentenced to life imprisonment for their extensive list of crimes. Ronnie was a Category A prisoner who was not allowed to mix with other prisoners before being certified insane and moved to Broadmoor in 1979. He suffered from schizophrenia, which was kept under control through medication. The twins operated Crayley Enterprises, a celebrity bodyguard business, with their brother Charlie while they were behind bars in separate facilities. Ronnie Cray died of a heart attack in Broadmoor in March 1995 at the age of 61. His twin Reggie attended his funeral in handcuffs. Ian Ball, another patient at Broadmoor, tried to kidnap Princess Anne in 1974 while her car was en route to Buckingham Palace. The princess was just 23 when Ball began shooting at the car before trying to drag her from the vehicle. He wanted to hold her for ransom and planned to donate the £3 million to the NHS. Apparently, he felt mental health services were not good enough. This was the first ever kidnap attempt on a member of the royal family, and 4 men were wounded, including the princess's chauffeur. Ronnie Russell, a boxer, happened to be walking past and intervened. He said of Anne's reaction, "She was very, very together, telling him, 'Just go away and don't be such a silly man.'" Charles Bronson, also known as Charles Salvador, is often dubbed as Britain's most violent prisoner. In 1974, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for armed robbery but racked up a life sentence for attacks on inmates and staff alike. Infamously, while at Broadmoor, he staged a 3-day protest on the roof, causing £250,000 worth of damage. Bronson has spent time at prisons and hospitals across the country, including Franklin and Belmarsh. He has a parole hearing approaching which will be held publicly. The list goes on, but that's a different tale for a later date. All the Victorian superintendents, including Orange, were attacked at least once, and many of the staff were too. Now, the first attack on a superintendent was in March 1866 in the Asylum Chapel. On that day, an unpredictable patient called John Hughes insisted on sitting on the front row close to John Mayo, Broadmoor's first leader. Mayo's journal then describes what happens next, and he writes, "A somewhat serious attack was made upon me in the chapel during morning service. John Hughes, a patient not hitherto known to be at any time dangerous to others, had placed himself on the bench in front of the fixed seats in the center of the chapel. As the service was drawing to a close, Hughes rushed towards my pew and struck at me with a stone, weighing 14 ounces, in a handkerchief. The attendant reached the pew with Hughes and threw his arms around him in that manner, breaking the violence of the blow. I was kneeling but raised my head and received the blow just over the left temple. It is a mercy that I am here to write this account, and this was very much the Broadmoor weapon of choice when tackling authority, a heavy object in a sling. It's very David and Goliath." Mayo was badly injured and he spent months recovering. Hughes was moved to solitary confinement. He said that Mayo had accused him of murdering the Queen of Heaven. So you may also not be surprised to hear that staff turnover was quite high to begin with. It approached 50% annually during the 1860s, and most staff who left resigned of their own accord, particularly female attendants when they left to get married. But staff discipline was also a serious problem, with the number of dismissals a year often in double figures. And a glance through the annual reports lists some of the reasons why staff were dismissed. And these included dishonesty, incompetence, drunkenness, sleeping on night duty, using abusive language, and letting patients escape. And there were a number of attempted escapes in the early years. In fact, there were 26 in total between 1863 and 1873. Now, rarely, of course. The escapes could mostly be put down to either the boundary wall being inadequate or the bars on the windows being defective. Work was undertaken to improve both those things, and the escape rate tapered off. However, the most famous escape in Broadmoor's history belongs to a gentleman called James Kelly. Kelly was also a murderer who had killed his wife by stabbing her in the throat with a penknife. He had suspected that she was being unfaithful to him, and so he attacked her one day in the house that they shared with his mother-in-law. And his is a typically sad Broadmoor story of someone who killed the person closest to them. His wife lingered for some days in hospital after the attack, and although she gave the statement that convicted him, she had also forgiven him before she died. But in January 1888, Kelly escaped from the asylum using a false key that he had made with another patient. And this key got him out of his block and into the kitchen garden, and from there he scaled the wall. And not only did he manage to scale the wall, but like David McLean, Alice Kay, and William Bisgrove before him, he also disappeared. He had roots in both London and Liverpool, but could be found in neither. Years passed. The occasional letter arrived from other asylums or prisons saying that someone who fitted Kelly's description had been brought in. But it was never him. Perhaps he was dead. 8 years later, in 1896, a man presented himself at the British consul's residence in New Orleans and said that he was an escaped lunatic from Broadmoor and also that he wanted to go back. Contact was made with the asylum and an affidavit taken of the man's history. He was called James Kelly. He had murdered his wife and he had escaped from Broadmoor in 1888. When the consul staff were satisfied that they had their man, he was duly put on board a ship to Liverpool to be arrested at the other end. And the date of the ship's arrival was notified to Broadmoor and 2 attendants dispatched to pick up Kelly. Except that the ship arrived in Liverpool a day early and they weren't there. So Kelly hung around for a while on the deck and at the port, but eventually decided that if no one was coming for him, he would make his own luck, and he took off into Liverpool to vanish once more. But Kelly has become a patient of greater note in the last 10 years, as he has been accused posthumously of being Jack the Ripper. Now this is based largely on circumstantial evidence that he had lived in the East End of London. He was a convicted murderer and a lunatic and was indeed at large during the Ripper killings. One or two authors have made much of the fact that the Metropolitan Police actually raided his mother-in-law's house at the height of the killings, and the suggestion is it's unclear precisely why they decided to do so. However, that raid did coincide with a Home Office memo that survives on Kelly's file, and that asks, would it not be well to make inquiry as to what steps have been taken to recapture this man? It's not likely he's the Whitechapel murderer, but his offense was cutting his wife's throat and he escaped last January. It would be well to know what has become of him. The Broadmoor staff were clear that Kelly was not the Ripper. They considered him a fairly depressive but stable character, and they'd never seen any violence from him. Nurses could isolate a patient and place them in solitary confinement. Without reference to a doctor, female patients were left naked on occasions and deprived of sanitary towels, glasses, and hearing aids. 33 former patients of Broadmoor claimed either to have suffered or witnessed acts of brutality. But times have changed from the Victorian era. While many acts of inhumane treatment have occurred over the years, one such story cannot be forgotten. Whether it was at Leeds General Infirmary or the high-security Broadmoor Mental Health Hospital, Jimmy Savile knew how to get to the heart of institutions caring for the most vulnerable. His modus operandi was always the same. Over 5 decades, Savile charmed his way into hospital corridors in a familiar pattern that started with befriending senior health officials and ended with the sexual abuse of hundreds of victims in their hospital beds. In 1960, Savile ingratiated himself at Leeds General Infirmary LGI by helping out on the hospital's radio station. Before long, he was volunteering as a porter on the hospital wards, wearing the same white coat and name tag as the other workers, who saw him as one of the lads. Not only was Savile well liked among many frontline staff, he was feted by a succession of hospital bosses who basked in the reflected glow of their celebrity porter. Savile's friendship with hospital chiefs meant he was given access to patients, often unsupervised, cherry-picking his victims from a list of names on a whiteboard. He'd just turn up and say, "Right, what's on the board?" And he would go and get a patient. He would choose his own. That is how he did it. One LGI worker told the NHS investigation. The abuse ranged from lewd remarks and inappropriate touching to sexual assault and rape. It took place on wards, in lifts, in corridors, in offices and off-site, in a local cafe, in his camper van, and in his mother's house nearby. He sexually abused one girl as she lay unable to move on a hospital trolley. The girl told how she was too terrified to scream, as Saville pushed the trolley into a lift before untying her hospital gown and groping her breasts. Saville is believed to have sexually abused 60 individuals in his time at LGI, including at least 33 patients aged from 5 to 75. The independent investigation, chaired by Dr. Sue Proctor, who reported this. One former Broadmoor nurse told investigators that Saville boasted about performing sex acts on corpses and mucked about in the mortuary, posing in photographs with the deceased after placing them in lurid positions. He claimed to have stolen glass eyes and had them made into jewelry. The former nurse said he was saying that they used to put the bodies together, male and female, and he also said that they took photographs, and also that he got involved in some of the photographs. Saville spoke publicly about his warped interest in the dead, saying in an interview with Lynn Barber in May 1982, "When I lay those bodies away, I look at good muscles, good organs, good brains, beautiful eyes, liver and kidneys, and I think, what a waste." But what the investigation uncovered shocked even experienced doctors. Proctor said, "The allegations about his behavior in the mortuary are incredibly harrowing. We have had 2 accounts from completely unrelated and unconnected witnesses who said that he wore very huge rings that he said were made from the glass eyes of dead bodies." On the 1st of April 2001, West London Mental Health Trust took over the responsibility for the hospital. The trust reports to the NHS executive through NHS England London. The former director, who then became the CEO of the trust, quit in 2009 after Healthcare Commission and Care Quality Commission reported findings of serious failures to ensure patient safety at Broadmoor. In 2014, the Director of Specialist and Forensic Services resigned just prior to the conclusions of an investigation into a bullying culture. The next permanent CEO retired in 2015 in the wake of poor Care Quality Commission findings and other problems in the trust. A new head of security was appointed in March 2013, John Arihan, who had 30 years' experience at Scotland Yard and had worked as a bodyguard for members of the royal family. Meanwhile, the trust allowed ITV to film a 2-part documentary within Broadmoor in 2014. Press releases stated that on average, there are 4 assaults per week on staff. Psychiatrist Amlin Basu, clinical director of Broadmoor since March 2014, promoted the documentary, but then decided to leave the NHS in 2015, amidst funding and staffing problems, despite the trust having just highlighted investment in his skills through its prestigious initiative to improve the quality of patient care in the NHS. In January 2020, the news reported how Broadmoor Hospital bosses revealed major plans to develop its notorious former site, amid rumors it could be turned into a hotel. Patients and staff moved into the new £250 million Broadmoor Hospital on December 16th, near to its former 150-year-old Victorian home. However, the old hospital remains a ghost town. Its owners, West London NHS Trust, says it is open for commercial or residential bidding. In recent days, residents have spotted works taking place on the old psychiatric hospital. However, locals have quizzed how this can take place if it's a listed building. Some believe the site won't be taken down as there's too much history. The history of the place is a landmark, and there is now a new block next door on the hospital grounds. The people working there have kept our country safe from some of the worst criminal minds in the UK, if not the world. Do not take that away from anyone. It is a testament to the years of keeping people safe. Another added, "That's awful to knock it down. Could be used as a museum and do tours, albeit for the morbid." We spoke to the NHS Trust, which runs Broadmoor Hospital, to find out whether they're allowed to. The NHS Trust, which runs Broadmoor Hospital, said they are in keeping with restrictions for protected buildings which are listed. For all of its crooked history, ups and downs, and fearsome reputation of housing the worst of the worst in the UK, Broadmoor remains a crucial element of the history of care for those not mentally fit for the world around us. Thank you for watching episode 4 of Twisted Tales. Subscribe for plenty more to come. See you soon.